"You're a stupid old man." My son yelled and threw my old files into the trash. Among them was the hidden property deed I had gifted him, 40 minutes later. He froze in shock. I didn't move, didn't shout. I just stood in the doorway, watching him destroy years of work, as if he could erase everything I had done with a flick of his hand. The papers fluttered through the air, landing in the trash with soft, wet thuds. He looked triumphant, his face red with fury, as if tossing these old files made him king of the world. The kitchen light flickered overhead, casting jagged shadows across his face. The boy I had raised, taught how to be honest, how to fight for what's right, now looked like a stranger armed with nothing but anger. I thought about all those early mornings, the smell of coffee brewing while he slept, packing lunches quietly so he wouldn't know the worry behind my calm smile. The nights I stayed awake, listening at the door, making sure no shadow touched him. And now this. He sneered, tossing another paper into the garbage. The sound of crumpling sheets felt like a punch to my chest. I saw the edge of an envelope peeking out from the pile. My gift, my secret, the property deed. A piece of my life I had given him quietly, without expectation, because I trusted him to honor it. But he didn't know. And in his rage he threw it away. I breathed slowly, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant barking of a dog down the street, the way the morning sunlight streaked across the counter like it was trying to warn him. He spun around, chest heaving, finally noticing me standing there. "Why aren't you doing anything?" He spat. "Are you just going to let me clean up your mess?" I shook my head slowly. "No, son. I'm letting you learn something important." He laughed, sharp and bitter, but I could see the confusion flicker in his eyes. "You're always so calm." "Too calm for your own good." I let him talk, let him vent. Let him feel powerful for a few moments longer. Then I bent down, quietly gathering the discarded papers. I didn't rush. I folded the deed carefully and tucked it into my coat pocket. His eyes widened, but he didn't dare move. The realization hadn't hit yet, that the most important thing he destroyed was the thing I had given him in love. He stepped closer, anger shifting to curiosity. What are you doing?" "Saving what matters," I said softly. "Because some things are worth more than your anger." He froze. He didn't expect me to stay calm. Didn't expect me to reclaim what he had thought he had power over. I took out my phone. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment. Then I pressed a number I hadn't dialed in years. A man who had stood with me through fire, who knew secrets no one else did. The kind of ally you hope you never need, but are grateful for when the moment comes. The line rang twice. Then a deep, familiar voice answered. "You all right, old man?" I smiled faintly. "I will be. But I need your help. 40 minutes from now, my son will realize something important. I want you ready." He said nothing, just listened. I gave him the address, the instructions, and hung up. I looked back at my son. He was pacing, muttering under his breath, casting glances at the trash can like it had insulted him personally. He had no idea that the single piece of paper he had thrown away was about to rewrite everything he thought he owned. I stepped outside, the morning sun cutting through the haze. The street glistened from last night's rain, lamps reflecting faint gold streaks on the wet pavement. Neighbors walked by, pretending not to notice the old man standing there quietly, but I didn't care. 40 minutes, the clock in the kitchen ticked relentlessly. And in that quiet, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in years. Because I knew the truth had weight. And sometimes, the heaviest truth is what teaches the hardest lesson. I walked slowly back inside. He glanced at me, uncertain now, his anger cracking like thin ice. The boy who thought he held power in his fists didn't realize the real lesson was about to unfold. I sat in the living room, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional squeak of the floorboards under his restless pacing. I thought about the years lost, the fights we had, the silence that had grown between us. Then I pulled out the deed from my pocket again, looking at it carefully, folded and hidden all this time. It wasn't just a paper. It was a reminder of trust, of love, of patience I had hoped he would one day understand. I placed it on the table, unseen, not as a threat, not as punishment, but as a quiet promise that life has a way of balancing itself, and the truth always arrives. I took a deep breath. 40 minutes. And in that silence, I felt the calm before the storm of understanding. 40 minutes passed like an eternity. The clock ticked on the wall, steady and relentless, as I sat quietly in the living room. The sunlight poured through the blinds, casting long stripes across the wooden floor. I could hear him moving around in the kitchen, still muttering to himself, still unaware that the smallest action could change everything. I thought of all the mornings I had risen before dawn, all the nights I had stayed awake, watching, worrying, praying he would grow up with integrity. I never imagined the lessons I had taught would one day be met with outright contempt. The house was filled with tension, like the air before a storm breaks. Even the old floorboards seemed to creak more loudly, as if warning him that the moment of truth was near. I stood and walked toward the window, looking down at the street. Neighbors went about their mornings, some laughing, some walking dogs, some rushing past. And yet none of them could see the silent storm that was about to hit just beyond this door. Then I heard it. The soft crunch of papers under his shoe. He was rifling through the trash again. I didn't move. I let him do it. Let him panic a little. When he finally spotted something sticking out, the edge of the envelope I had tucked into the trash, his eyes widened. He froze mid-step, like someone had yanked the rug from under him. "What? What is this?" he whispered. His voice trembled now, a crack forming where anger used to dominate. I didn't answer. I simply walked closer. I could feel the weight of years pressing down on us. The invisible ledger of all the times I had stayed silent to protect him, all the sacrifices that went unnoticed, and the respect he had refused to give. He pulled the envelope out carefully. It was creased and slightly torn, but intact. I could see the letters of the property deed through the paper, the proof of something I had given freely, something he had nearly destroyed out of spite. "Wait. Is this?" he stammered, his hands shaking. "You gave me this." I nodded slowly. "Yes, a gift. One I trusted you to respect." He sank to the floor, holding the envelope like it was a fragile artifact. I didn't know," he whispered. "Why? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you weren't ready," I said quietly. "You wouldn't have appreciated it. And sometimes the best lessons are learned not when someone tells you, but when you see the truth for yourself." His face turned pale. Panic gave way to confusion, confusion to fear. He stared at the papers, then at me, then back at the envelope as if it might vanish if he blinked. You threw this away," I said gently. "Do you realize what you almost lost?" His eyes filled with tears, but not the kind I would have expected. Not the kind of anger or frustration. This was different. This was shock, recognition, the realization that the world he thought he controlled was slipping through his fingers. I sat across from him, hands folded, watching him crumble quietly. The quiet was heavy, full of meaning, full of the weight of years lost to pride and misjudgment. Then I took out my phone again. I scrolled to the recordings I had kept from the meetings and property deals I had quietly overseen. The proof of everything, the truth of what had been his inheritance, the work I had done to secure it for him. "Son," I said softly, "this is why patience matters. This is why respect matters. Because life doesn't wait for anger to pass. It rewards the careful, the observant, and punishes the reckless." He looked at me, eyes wide. I don't understand." "You will," I said. "But it takes time to see what's been hidden and courage to accept it when you do." I handed him the flash drive, the recordings and files all collected over years. His hands trembled as he took it. I could feel the tension draining slowly, like a river returning to its banks after a flood. He sank back on the couch, breathing heavily. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, making the dust in the air glitter like tiny fragments of truth finally revealed. You saved this for me," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "Even when you didn't know it." He buried his face in his hands. Tears slipped through his fingers. I almost ruined it. I almost ruined everything." "You almost did," I said. "But now you have a choice. You can let this moment break you, or you can let it teach you." He looked up at me, fear and awe mixed in his expression. I don't know if I can fix it," he admitted. "Start by trying," I said. "Start by understanding. Everything else will follow." The phone in my pocket buzzed quietly. A message from my ally. He's ready. 40 minutes are up. I nodded slightly. The next part of the lesson was about to begin. The part where understanding meets consequence. Where the arrogance of anger collides with the quiet weight of truth. And my son. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The moment stretched longer than I expected. The sunlight shifted through the blinds, painting the floor in stripes of gold and shadow. I watched my son sitting there, his hands shaking, the envelope and flash drive clutched like fragile treasures. He had finally stopped pacing, finally stopped muttering to himself, finally realized that the calm old man he had dismissed was a man who had been quietly protecting him all along. I didn't speak. I just waited. Patience had always been my weapon. And now, it was working. I pulled out the deed again, opened it carefully, and ran my finger along the edges of the paper. This was more than property. It was years of trust. Years of quiet work I never mentioned. A gift he had almost thrown away without knowing its value. My son glanced at me, eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Dad, I don't know what to say," he whispered. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I shook my head slowly. "Because you wouldn't have believed me. And because some lessons aren't meant to be told. They're meant to be realized." He looked down at the envelope again. I feel like I don't deserve this," he said, voice barely audible. I saw the weight of years in that voice, regret, shame, and finally, a flicker of humility. I smiled faintly. "No one deserves the lessons life gives them. You earn understanding by paying attention to what really matters." He opened the envelope carefully, pulling out the deed. His fingers trembled. And as he held it, I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. The realization of what he had almost destroyed, the inheritance he had taken for granted, and the mistakes he had made in anger. I stood and walked toward the door, glancing down the street. The old ally was waiting, just as I had asked. His presence was calm, steady, reassuring. The kind of presence that makes a man think twice before acting rashly. I turned back to my son. 40 minutes, I said. That's all it took for you to face the first truth. Now the next part begins. He looked up, confusion and fear mixing in his expression. What next part? He asked. You'll see soon enough, I said. And when you do, you'll understand why patience is stronger than anger, and why truth, once revealed, cannot be ignored. I walked outside, feeling the cool morning air on my face. The street was quiet, except for the occasional car passing by. The city moved on, unaware of the storm about to hit inside the small living room of my home. I heard the soft crunch of gravel. My ally had arrived. No fanfare, no announcement. Just the kind of silent arrival that carries authority without shouting. I returned inside, closing the door slowly. My son still held the deed, staring at it like it might vanish if he looked away. He didn't notice me move toward the table, placing the flash drive next to the envelope. Proof, evidence, and the bridge between anger and understanding. He picked up the drive, hesitated, then finally plugged it into the laptop I had left on the table. Files appeared. Names, contracts, transactions. All the proof he had refused to believe until now. His eyes widened. All of this? He stammered. Why didn't you tell me? Because you needed to see it for yourself, I said quietly. Some truths are too heavy for words alone. You have to face them. You have to feel the weight of your mistakes. Only then do they teach anything at all. He sank to the floor, laptop on his lap, scrolling through files, numbers, and letters. The weight of years pressed down on him. I could see the anger slowly melting into something else. Shame, regret, and the first hint of clarity. Dad, I think I understand now, he said softly. Some of it, I didn't see. I didn't know. You're starting, I said. That's all that matters right now. I watched him for a long while. Every subtle shift in his posture, every tremble of his hand, was proof that the lesson was sinking in. 40 minutes ago, he had thrown everything away in anger. Now he was learning that the things you think are worthless can carry the heaviest weight of all. The laptop hummed softly. Papers rustled gently as he scrolled through them, and the sunlight shifted again, painting gold stripes across the floor. I felt the calm of a plan unfolding exactly as it should. I sat back in my chair, hands folded. No need to speak. No need to rush. The quiet presence of truth was louder than any shouting could ever be. Then I glanced at the clock. Minutes ticked by. Each one bringing him closer to the moment he would finally realize the cost of arrogance, the value of patience, and the power of quiet wisdom. The lesson wasn't over. Far from it, but the first crack had appeared in his armor. The first spark of understanding. And I knew. Once that spark ignited, there would be no turning back. 40 minutes. One envelope, one deed. One father, patiently waiting for his son to finally see the truth. The storm was coming, and my son. He had no idea what it would look like when it hit. He sat there, frozen. The sunlight had shifted again, glinting off the laptop screen and lighting up the scattered papers on the table. The envelope, the deed, the files, all of it stared back at him like a mirror he wasn't ready to face. Dad, his voice cracked. He looked at me, eyes wide, hands trembling, as if seeing me for the first time in years. I stayed calm, didn't rush him, didn't fill the silence with words he might not hear. I simply waited. He scrolled through the files, each document heavier than the last. Contracts, letters, signatures. Proof of years of work he had dismissed. Proof of inheritance he almost destroyed. Proof of patience he never appreciated. His hands shook so violently I thought he might drop the laptop. Why didn't you ever tell me? He whispered again. I thought I knew everything. You thought you did, I said softly. And that's the danger of arrogance. Believing you know more than you do blinds you to what's right in front of you. He buried his face in his hands. Tears slipped through his fingers. I ruined it. I could have thrown everything away. Everything you built. Everything you gave me. Yes, I said, but you didn't, and that's why this moment matters. He looked up at me, eyes wide, filled with disbelief and guilt. I don't even know if I can ever fix it. I don't deserve to fix it. You can, I said. You start by facing it. By understanding the consequences of your actions. By accepting that anger and pride never teach the lessons patience and care can. He turned back to the laptop, scrolling through the records again. I saw the subtle shift in him. The anger that had consumed him earlier was cracking, giving way to shock, confusion, and finally, reflection. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the machine and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Even the sunlight seemed to pause, casting stripes across the floor like a stage set for the quiet unfolding of truth. I walked slowly around the table, watching him from every angle, not to intimidate, but to let him feel the weight of the lesson. In the presence of someone who had patiently waited for him to learn it himself. Dad, it's real, he whispered. All of it. The deed, the files. You really did all this for me? Yes, I said. For you, and for yourself. Because the lessons you ignore today become regrets tomorrow. He sank to the floor, leaning against the table, his fingers brushing the envelope gently, almost reverently. I don't know what I thought I was doing, he murmured. I didn't see any of it. That's the first step, I said calmly. Seeing it now, recognizing what you almost lost, and realizing that trust and patience aren't things you can destroy without consequence. I noticed the sweat on his forehead, the way his jaw worked as he swallowed hard. The boy who had yelled and thrown my files was now silent, overwhelmed by the weight of truth. I pulled up a chair and sat across from him. Not to lecture, not to scold, but to be a witness to the transformation that was quietly unfolding. You understand now, I said softly. Why I never got angry when you were careless. Why I let you learn some lessons the hard way. He nodded slowly, head hanging low. I feel like I should have listened. I should have respected you. I almost ruined everything. Yes, I said. And the difference between almost and never is realizing the moment you still have to make it right. It's understanding that patience and truth can teach what anger never will. He looked down at the envelope again. Dad, I'm sorry. For yelling, for throwing it away, for everything. I leaned forward and placed my hand lightly on his shoulder. You don't need to say more. Your actions now will say everything that matters. The rest is up to you. He let out a shaky breath, finally relaxing a little. The storm of anger had passed. In its place, something heavier, something more powerful, was taking root. Understanding that, I watched him for a long while, the way his fingers traced the edges of the deed, the way his eyes softened with the realization that respect and patience had value he had never fully seen before. Then I stood, moving to the window. I could see my ally's car parked across the street. He had waited, quietly, as instructed, a silent witness to the beginning of my son's reckoning. The moment was almost ready. The final lesson was about to unfold. One envelope, one deed. One quiet father waiting for his son to finally understand the weight of his mistakes. The room was thick with tension. Every breath, every movement seemed amplified. The boy who had yelled and thrown things in anger now faced the first consequences of his recklessness. And he didn't yet know the full measure of what was coming. The storm wasn't over. It had only begun. The room was heavy with silence. Even the sunlight seemed hesitant, slanting through the blinds in long, deliberate stripes, as if it too wanted to witness what was about to happen. He sat on the floor, the envelope still clutched in his hands. The laptop hummed softly, its glow illuminating the shock etched into his face. I could see the way his chest rose and fell, how every breath carried the weight of guilt and disbelief. Dad, I don't know how to fix this, he whispered, voice trembling, barely audible. I didn't mean to. I held up a hand, stopping him. Don't say a word, I said. Not yet. Let the truth speak first. Let it sink in. He looked up, wide-eyed, confused, scared, and almost broken. I could see the fear that had replaced the arrogance from earlier. The same boy who had yelled, who had thrown my files without thought, was now faced with something far heavier. I walked slowly around the table, hands folded behind my back, watching him unravel quietly. There was no anger in me, no harsh words, only the calm presence of a man who had seen decades of mistakes and had learned that silence often teaches the hardest lessons. I pulled out the deed again, carefully, reverently, and placed it on the table. The soft rustle of the paper echoed in the room. He flinched slightly. You really gave me this? He asked, voice cracking. Yes, I said quietly. For you. For the person you were meant to be, not the person anger made you yesterday. He stared at the papers, then at the laptop, then back at the envelope. His fingers shook as he touched it, as if even a gentle brush of paper could remind him of how close he had come to destroying everything. I can't believe I did this, he said, burying his face in his hands. I threw it away. I didn't respect it. I didn't respect you. Yes, I said softly. And now you see why respect matters. Why patience matters. Why understanding is worth more than shouting or slamming doors. He looked at me, eyes glistening, the first tears streaking down his face. I never realized I was so blind, he murmured. I almost ruined it all. Everything. I nodded. That's the thing about mistakes, son. They're heavy. They sit on your chest and make it hard to breathe. But they also teach. And you've started to learn. Now it's up to you to carry the lesson forward. He sank further, shaking, scrolling through the laptop files with trembling hands. Contracts, letters, account statements, proof of the property. Everything I had quietly secured for him over the years. The realization hit him hard, that the life he thought he controlled was actually a gift he had taken for granted. Dad. I don't know if I can ever fix it, he whispered. Yes, I said, but the first step is admitting it. And you've done that. I leaned back, watching him carefully, the tension in the room thick and almost unbearable. I had orchestrated this carefully, allowing him to confront the consequences without forcing the lesson down his throat. Sometimes the weight of truth is stronger than the loudest punishment. He picked up the envelope again, turning it over in his hands, examining the carefully folded deed as if it held secrets he had never seen. He glanced at me, eyes wide, searching for guidance. I simply nodded. No words necessary. The faint click of the laptop keyboard filled the room as he began reading the documents more closely. His breathing became slower, steadier. Shock and panic giving way to understanding. I watched his body language shift. The hunched shoulders of defiance softened. The frantic movements of anger slowed. He was starting to process. Starting to see the consequences of his actions not as punishment, but as lessons. I walked around the table again, slow and deliberate. Every movement measured, calm, reassuring. You see, son, I said quietly, life has a way of giving you what you need, sometimes only after you've thrown it away. And sometimes, you only learn its value when it's almost gone. His eyes filled with tears again, a mix of relief, regret, and awe. I didn't know. I was so stupid, he said softly. You were right all along. I was blind. Yes, I said. And now you have a choice. Do you let this moment define you, or do you use it to become the man you should be? He looked down at the deed, then at the laptop, and for the first time, I saw clarity in his eyes. The realization that actions have consequences. The understanding that anger can destroy, but patience and wisdom can rebuild. I stood quietly, giving him space. 40 minutes had passed. The storm of emotions was cresting. The lesson was nearly complete. All that remained was for him to accept it fully, to feel the weight of his mistakes and the power of what remained. Finally, he looked up at me, face pale but eyes steady. I understand now, Dad. I can't believe I almost ruined everything. I'm so sorry. I smiled faintly, hand resting lightly on his shoulder. You've taken the hardest step, I said. Admitting it. The rest will come. Patience, understanding. Those are lessons that last a lifetime. He sank back against the couch, breathing slowly, the storm in his chest easing. The sun shifted again, casting long, soft shadows across the room. And I realized the lesson had worked. The truth had arrived exactly as it should. But the final step, the true resolution, was still ahead. The reckoning wasn't complete. And he didn't yet know how powerful the final moment would be. The calm before the final wave was heavy with anticipation. The room was quiet, almost reverent. The sunlight had softened, spilling golden light across the floor, making dust particles glint like tiny fragments of truth. He sat on the couch, the envelope and laptop before him, hands trembling slightly, eyes wide with shock and understanding. 40 minutes ago, he had been angry, yelling at me, throwing papers into the trash like they were worthless. Now the boy I raised was staring at the weight of his mistakes, the consequences of his own pride. I walked slowly toward him, hands folded behind my back, calm and steady. "Son," I said softly, "look at what you almost lost." He looked down at the envelope again, the deed inside carefully folded, intact despite the chaos. I almost ruined it all, Dad," he whispered. "I didn't respect you. I didn't see the value of what you gave me. I was stupid." I shook my head slowly, sitting beside him without touching him. "No, son. You weren't stupid. You were blind. Anger has a way of making us blind. But now you see. And that is worth more than any punishment I could have given." He turned to me, eyes shimmering with tears, finally humbled, finally aware of the weight of trust and patience. I don't know how to thank you," he said softly. "I don't even deserve." "You deserve nothing," I said, and my voice was calm, strong, steady. "You only earn respect and trust by how you handle what is given to you. Not by taking it for granted. Not by throwing it away. You've learned the hardest way, but sometimes that's the only way it sticks." He stared at me, swallowing hard, finally letting the tears fall freely. The boy who had shouted at me, now seeing the father he had ignored all along. I reached for the envelope, and together we opened it again. The deed inside was more than paper. It was proof of trust, proof of love, proof of the years I had worked quietly so he would have a foundation for life. "You see," I said gently, "what seems small or hidden can carry more weight than what's loud and obvious. Sometimes silence teaches louder than words. Sometimes patience holds more power than anger." He nodded slowly, finally letting the lesson sink in. I understand now, Dad. I'll never take this for granted again." I placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "No, but you also need to understand something else. Life will keep testing you. Pride, anger, greed. They'll come again. And the only way to meet them is with wisdom and patience. The moment you see the truth and choose to act carefully is the moment you grow into the man you're meant to be." He looked down at the laptop, then at the envelope, then back at me. I'll make it right," he said softly. "I promise." I smiled faintly, feeling a weight lift from my chest. He had begun to see. The arrogance, the anger, the disrespect. All replaced now with understanding, humility, and the first spark of responsibility. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. The air smelled faintly of rain and sunlight. Neighbors passed by, unaware of the storm that had just passed through our home. I glanced back at my son. He was sitting quietly, hands folded, eyes down, absorbing the lesson fully. And I realized something profound, a truth I had carried through decades. Some lessons cannot be taught with words alone. Some truths only arrive when the heart is ready to see them. I sat down again beside him, the quiet stretching between us like a bridge rebuilt. "I'm proud of you, son," I said softly. "Not for the gift you've received, but for the understanding you finally earned." He looked up at me, a faint, shaky smile on his face. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of calm and closure. "Sometimes," I said quietly, "silence is the loudest answer. Patience is the greatest teacher. And love. Love is the strongest legacy we leave behind." The deed lay on the table, the flash drive beside it, symbols of trust, patience, and quiet wisdom. My son sat quietly, absorbing the lesson, no words necessary. And in that room, in that moment, I saw the man he could become. A man who would remember this day, remember the weight of his mistakes, and remember that respect, patience, and truth carry more power than anger ever will. And that was enough. For him. For me. For the years we had lost, and the years we still had left.